what speech. So it's just recording, and I think Milan is here. Sorry. So today we'll be talking about everything speech sound disorders related. We'll start by talking about what speech sound disorders are, and we'll provide an overview of the different types of speech sound disorders and how we treat the most common types. We'll then share our experiences working with children with speech sound disorders, and we also welcome you guys to share your experiences. We'll provide an overview of the risk factors and the causes of speech sound disorders and how it may impact upon students within the classroom. We'll then give you some ideas of some strategies that you can use to support children within the classroom. And we'll finish off by answering any of your questions as best as we can. And feel free also if you guys want to stop us or ask us anything throughout the presentation. So what are speech sound disorders? Speech sound disorders are a type of childhood developmental communication impairment. Speech refers to how we say sounds in words. For example, the S sound in sat. If a child has speech difficulties, it means they have difficulty using and organizing or physically producing the sounds they need to communicate with others. Therefore, it impacts upon how easy it is to be understood by others. Some children's speech is delayed for their age. Other speech errors are atypical for any age, so they're considered unusual and uncommon regardless of how old the child is. Prevalence refers to the percentage of children with speech sound disorders at any given time. So the prevalence of speech sound disorders is quite high, and researchers found a prevalence range from around 2.3% to 24.6%. Some children's speech will improve without support. However, at least half of the children will not improve and therefore will require support. So speech involves three key components: our ears, mind, and our mouth. We need to first be able to detect speech sounds using our hearing. We then need to use our mind to systematically organize the sounds or sound combinations to make sense of them. Every language has a different set of rules about how to combine and produce sounds. We then need to use our mouth, tongue, teeth, and muscles within our mouth to physically actually produce the sounds that we want to make. So there are 5 types of speech sound disorders that we'll be going through: phonological impairment, articulation impairment, inconsistent speech disorder, childhood apraxia of speech, and childhood dysarthria. Phonological impairment has a star on top of it as it is the most common. We'll go through the 2 most common ones that you may see in your classroom. So phonological impairments and articulation disorders, and we'll go through in more detail shortly. So phonological impairments and inconsistent speech disorders are mind-based impairments. This means there's a difficulty with perceiving or organizing sounds in the mind and not a difficulty with actually physically producing the sound. For example, they may get t and k mixed up because of this organizational difficulty, rather than an actual difficulty with physically saying the sounds. Whereas an articulation impairment, childhood apraxia of speech, and childhood dysarthria are motor-based impairments, which means children have difficulty producing the sound physically and therefore needs lots of support to facilitate the correct production of those sounds. The first type we'll talk about is phonological impairment. So what is a phonological impairment? It is when a child has pattern-based speech errors, such as a child that always replaces sounds made at the back of their mouth, like k and g, with sounds made with the front of their mouth, like t and d. So they might say tap instead of saying cap, for example. Many children display these patterns of speech errors when they are learning to talk. However, most patterns have a certain age where they typically should disappear, according to research. When these patterns persist and are no longer age appropriate for a child that is of an older age, it's considered a phonological delay or a phonological impairment. These patterns may also be atypical and uncommon for a child of their age, indicating a disorder. As you can see on this slide, we've included some examples of speech simplification patterns known as phonological patterns and at what age they typically should disappear for a child. So you're probably wondering, how do we treat speech sound disorders? We use a variety of methods and treatment approaches depending on what type of speech sound disorder the child has and how severe the child is. This slide can help you to understand what speech pathologists might work on in therapy for children with a phonological impairment, so you can best understand how to support them. Treatment for phonological impairment often involves contrasting a sound known to the child versus the error sound. For example, k versus t. This helps them understand that when they make errors in their speech, it changes the meaning of the word and people can't understand them. For example, the child may say tea when really they mean key. And so the therapist will emphasize the misunderstanding and say, tea, I don't quite understand what you mean. Did you mean key with your back k sound? Therefore, it prompts them to practice saying the sound correctly so people can understand them. The second type of speech sound disorder that we commonly see is an articulation impairment. An articulation problem is a physical speech problem when a child is trying to produce specific sounds. This is what people usually think of when they think of children that need speech therapy. For example, a child may not say their R or S correctly, and the sound may sound distorted and a little funny. For children with an articulation disorder, we use a different approach because the impairment is more motor-based, a physical problem. Therefore, they need speech pathologists to help guide them on how to physically produce the sound. Treatment involves targeting one error sound at a time through a hierarchy. For example, if a child needed help correctly producing the S sound, therapy would begin by targeting the sound by itself and then moving through to syllables, then words, phrases, sentences, and conversation each time the child masters each level. It's important we go through each level, as just because they can say the S sound by itself doesn't mean they can say it in words. It's kind of like playing tennis. Just because you can hit a ball doesn't mean you can play a game. So it requires practice at each of these levels. Julia?
These are some of our experiences working with children with speech sound disorders through our university placements. So Christine is currently working with a 4-year-old boy on his p, k, and v sounds, and a small group of year 1 and 2 students which have a lisp, so they can't say their S sound correctly. She has also worked with a 3-year-old boy before who naturally recovered quickly by himself by the time his therapy had started. She's also worked with a 6-year-old girl who had a cochlear implant and working on her sound. Her hearing problems meant that she was a little behind in learning her sounds and in telling her sounds apart, as for the first few years of her life, she wasn't able to hear the same as other children. I personally have worked with a 7-year-old girl that replaced her D sound with a G sound, so she might say dog as gog, and another 7-year-old girl which needed significant support to say her R sound. So it can be quite challenging, especially when they are a little older, to get them to say a new sound after it has become such a habit. So they needed quite a lot of sessions and practice to get them to say these new sounds. We welcome you all now to share your experiences working with children with speech sound disorders. So feel free to type it in the chat box, or you can take yourself off mute. Yeah, if anyone wants to share.
Has anyone had any experience? My son has hearing loss. He has a Baha instead of a cochlea. So yeah, I've been through a bit of speech development with him, and yeah, been through similar experiences. So yeah, you're right. The earlier that you sort of captured and put the correct patterns in there, it's easier to pick up. And
yeah. Did you guys pick up on that quickly when he was younger?
So that sort of happened through an operation that he lost some of his hearing. So yeah, so straight away we were linked in with the Shepherd Centre who helped us straight away. So yeah, we're very lucky.
Yeah, that's great to hear.
Yeah.
Has anyone else had any experiences? or a child maybe that makes some patterns where they replace certain sounds with other sounds.
I'm not sure if it's a pattern, but you know how children take a long time to say the TH, like thank you, thanks.
Yeah.
Like it seems like it's one of the last sounds that they pick up. Like my son was gobsmacked when he learned that TH was actually a sound, like instead of thanks, which is, is that quite common in children? Or?
Yeah, that's right. That's one of the last sounds. So it's probably very common that your volunteers will see in the classroom, because it is one of those sounds that resolve more in the school age years. Yeah.
I just noticed today with the class I had this morning that one of the children was getting the B sound and the D sound mixed up, but that's probably the length of it. So,
Fabiana, was that in writing or was that when they were speaking?
Sorry, that was in reading, yes, in speech.
Yeah. So that's a little bit of it. Hi, Milan. Sorry, I'm the student's clinical educator. I came in a little bit late. Hi, everyone.
Oh, hi. Hi, Milan.
So that error where they're getting the B's and D's mixed up when they're reading them and spelling them is a different sort of thing. We'll talk about that when we get into the literacy week of presentations, which will be, I think, November, I think, is that one. But that's a nice distinction to make, actually. The sounds, we talk about sounds with students in many different ways, and what we typically think is letters as sounds, but really we're talking about the sound being produced in the mouth right now. That's today's
okay
topic.
Thanks, Milan. Does anyone else have any experiences they'd like to share?
We've got something in the chat from Martina. So I work with a child who doesn't say their S sound, but I can't remember what they replace it with, and I'll pay more attention this week. Oh, okay. Yeah. Thanks for sharing, Martina. Anyone else before we move on? Okay, all right, we'll keep going. So there are some known risk factors that are associated with developing a speech sound disorder. So this includes being male in gender, pre and postnatal issues, so any birth complications, having hearing problems and recurring ear infections, having problems with oral structure or function. So these are physical problems such as sucking problems or a cleft palate, for example. Genes, so genetic predisposition, or coming from a lower socioeconomic background, low parental support for learning at the home, and low maternal education level, family history, so family history of speech, language, or literacy difficulties, and having a reactive temperament, which means having a strong reaction to events. So it is important to understand that risk factors increase the risk for a child potentially having a speech sound disorder, but do not mean that the child will definitely have one. So risk factors are not the same as predictors. So the actual causes of speech sound disorder are only known for a small proportion of children. So some identified causes include hearing loss, craniofacial abnormalities, so a cleft lip and palate. The familial nature of speech sound disorders indicates that genes may play a role for some children, having a cognitive or intellectual impairment, and having a motor impairment, which is a physical problem such as cerebral palsy. So these are some common speech errors that you may hear in the classroom, and it's good to draw your attention to these so you're aware of them if you hear them in the classroom, and you can notice if any of these are not typical or not age appropriate in the kids that you work with. So we have got substituting R for W, so they'll say rabbit as wabbit. This is a very typical error, but should be resolved by kindergarten at the latest. So beyond that, it is not developmentally appropriate, and so you may need to refer them to a speech pathologist. A distorted S, they're known as lisps. So a child may pronounce the S with their tongue sticking out, making it sound like a, or it may be produced with air escaping the side of their mouth. So that makes it kind of sound a bit slushy, and these are both atypical patterns. Another one is substituting back sounds like d and k for front sounds t and d. And this can happen in typical development when children are learning how to talk, but it should be resolved by about 3.5, 4 years of age. And just like Carly was saying before, substitutions like replacing th with f. So they might say free instead of three, as th is a later developing sound. You may see this in the classroom. However, correct production should occur by around age 8 at the very latest. So a child could be impacted in several ways in the classroom if they have a speech sound disorder. It can vary depending on how severe their speech errors are and how difficult it is to understand them. So socially, they may feel isolated and misunderstood, and may not be able to easily make friends. They may have lower grades. So speech sound disorders, it can impact on their literacy and reading development. So may appear not interested in school, may feel intimidated and not want to talk in front of others because they may be bullied or harassed by their peers for sounding maybe a bit babyish. They may have lower self-esteem because of this, and may have behavioural issues. They may rely on others to do the talking and may be talked over often in conversation. And peers and teachers may not be able to understand them, and teachers and peers may ask them to constantly repeat themselves. So this can be quite frustrating for the child. And therefore they may not be able to participate freely in activities and conversations and may not be able to express their wants and needs as effectively. So this may cause them to dislike school. Research has found that young children with speech sound disorders and a language impairment may be more likely to have academic and speech difficulties during school age and adolescent years, and poor educational and occupational outcomes. So as you were saying before, it often impacts, their literacy and their reading. So a quote from a child that has a speech sound disorder: "Nobody could understand me, so they didn't want to talk to me. I was really nervous, too nervous to go up to people playing because they wouldn't understand me and would tease me." So therefore, this shows the impact that speech sound disorders can have on children. And again, it varies depending on the child. So you might be wondering, what do speech pathologists do when we get a referral for a child with a speech sound disorder? So when a referral is made to speech pathologists, we undertake a comprehensive or formal assessment to determine what kind of speech errors a child is making. For example, is it their R sound they're having difficulty with, or all of their back sounds? And this allows us to make a diagnosis. So is it a phonological impairment versus an articulation disorder? And then from this, we plan treatment according to their diagnosis, error patterns, and set achievable goals. So as Christine mentioned before, we have different treatments and approaches for phonological versus articulation impairments, because phonological impairment is a difficulty with organizing sounds in the mind, and articulation is more motor based. So therefore we have to have treatment which targets their specific difficulty. And we collaborate with parents and the classroom teacher on strategies we can use to support their progress, both at home and at school.
Okay, now we'll be going through some strategies that can be used to support children within the classroom. So first, we recommend you trying to talk to their teachers and or their speech pathologists if possible, to get a better idea of their needs and how you can support them in the classroom. So fellow staff within the school may be better aware of that particular student's needs within the classroom, and may also be able to provide you with an idea of how you can best support the student. Some students may already have a speech pathologist working with them, either through the school or externally outside of the school, to see if you can get permission to speak to them, or if the classroom teacher can speak to them. They may be also able to point you in the right direction and give you some specific strategies to support that student in the classroom. If you feel like a certain student is struggling with making some sounds, let other staff know and keep an eye on that student to see how they're going, as a referral to a speech pathologist may be needed if they don't already have one. Another strategy is visuals. So visuals can be a simple and easy way to remind students of particular sounds in the classroom. So stick them up around the classroom or simply hold them up to remind the students to use that sound. Metaphors can also be really helpful to make the sound more relatable and memorable. And they can also help the student to remember what to do with their mouth. For example, the hissing snake sound, s, or the popping penguin sound, p. Some different ways that you can also support a child's speech include show them how to use the sounds. For example, if a child says, I have tat, you could say, oh, you have a cat. What is your cat's name? Talk about fixing up sounds in words. For example, you can say, I saw a tat. Oh, I said tat. I meant cat. I'm going to fix it up. I saw a cat. Avoid practicing their mistakes and ask the child to show you in a different way if you don't understand what they're saying. Get eye level with the child and say, look at my mouth, and slow down and over articulate the word that you want them to make and try and get them to copy you. You can also support their practice of sounds within the classroom by giving them specific feedback. So remind them of the sound they're working on and bring their attention to that sound, whether it be within a conversation or a classroom activity. You can also bring their attention to other words that start with that sound that they're working on. So when students say their sounds correctly, it's important to give them praise. So make the praise as specific as possible. So on this slide, there are some different examples of the specific praise that you can give them. For example, I heard you say van, good talking. I understood you. You said snake. That was a great back sound. I heard v, vacuum sound at the start. Good job. Well done. I like how you used your coughing k sound right at the front of that word. You can also provide them with rewards such as stamps and stickers to motivate their learning, especially because we don't want them to feel self-conscious about these errors that they're making. You can also support their practice of sounds within the classroom by giving them specific feedback on incorrect sounds when they make a mistake. For example, prompt them to correct themselves. I heard you say B. Is that what you mean? Emphasize that you don't understand them. Bin, that's not a bin. Did you mean pin with your p sound? You can also use those metaphors that I mentioned earlier to help them remember to use a sound. So don't forget to use your fussy fish sound at the end of the word. Provide them with a choice. Did you say key or tea? You can also help guide the attempt. So try adding the k sound at the front of that word. And you can also use hand gestures and facial expressions to help them make that sound. And you can model the correct sound for them so that they can copy after you. You can also remember to give them specific feedback if they correct themselves after getting it wrong. So you fixed it. I understand what you mean now.
So now we're going to show you some video examples of this. This is a popular speech pathologist known as Adventures in Speech Pathology on Instagram. She shows some good ways of how to interact with a child. Pay attention to how she gives specific feedback when helping the child on their sounds. So for example, she says, I saw your tongue when working on the sound. She also does a lot of modeling and uses her facial expressions to help exaggerate the sound that they are working on. So I'll just get that up now.
What we're going to do is we're going to roll the dice, and whatever number we roll is how many animals we cross off. So I rolled 2. I'm also going to say 2 of my TH words or sentences, and whoever goes all the way down to the end first wins. Okay, so
she's making it quite motivating for the child here, which is really good.
Race. Are you ready? Do you want to go first?
Yeah.
Here you go. Roll the dice. So you got 2. So just wait. The 2 words we're going to do that TH sound, but I might put it in the middle of words. Can you do other?
Other.
Good. That was with your TH. What about mother?
Mother.
Yeah, nice one. So
she's doing a lot of praise here as well for the correct sounds.
You mark off 2. You can circle them or put a line through them. Yeah, my turn. Oh, look what I got. What were those two words I just asked you to say?
Mother and
Other.
other.
Good, I saw your tongue. Okay, that's
So here she gives very specific feedback. So she says, oh, good, I saw your tongue.
my two. Your turn. Let's see if you get a big number.
Okay.
Oh, another 2. Can you say something about your mother? And I'm your mother. Use mother in a sentence. Look at me. Use mother in a sentence.
My mother can make tea for me.
I can. And you about father. There's a TH in father.
Father.
Yep.
Make
Oh, not
tea
father. Not father. Father.
Father.
Yep.
So here when she gets it wrong, notice how she draws attention to the sound and she does a lot of modeling and showing her mouth of how to correct
Make
herself.
tea for me.
He can too. Okay, you knock off 2. I'm going to see if I get a big number. Oh, we keep getting 2s. Okay, you ready? Let's
Oh,
do.
that's 4.
That is 4 altogether. Let's do pa
Path.
and moth.
Moth.
Good. I saw that little tongue come out for your tongue thing.
All right, and I'll show you another one as well for a different sound. Get that one up.
So that one was for the TH sound, and the one that Julie is getting up now will be for the S sound.
Okay, so I'm going to put my little paper clips on here. You ready? And then we'll do some fishing. Can you say this one? So this one is mess, but you watch what I do. But you watch what I do with my teeth. My teeth.
So here she's using a lot of modeling here, saying like, watch what I do with my teeth.
You could touch in. Ready? I go mess.
No.
Oh, can you do it really quietly? Mess. That's nice. So I'm going to put one on like that. I'm going to put it down. Next one. Look. Face.
Face.
Really tiny S. Face. Put your teeth together. Face.
So again, with the specific feedback, so saying put your teeth together to help say the S sound.
You're trying so hard. Here we go. Let's do horse. That was long. Did you remember to keep your teeth together? Yeah. Let's do, we had this come past our house. Ready? Buzz. No, your tongue stuck out. Buzz. Now you've got to keep your teeth together. Buzz. Really quiet like this. Buzz. Good, that's it. I like when you smile. Your tongue keeps poking out. We got to keep it down. So I'm going to put some.
So again, she's giving specific feedback, directing her to make sure that she keeps her tongue inside.
More down. Oh, we live in a house. That was it. You had your teeth together. High five, sweetie. Good.
And there we go with like a lot of praise here, high-fiving. That's good to see as well to help motivate the child. So I'll stop that one there. So we're at the end of our presentation now. So lastly, we just wanted to ask if anyone had any questions at all. Sorry. So if you have any questions about anything that we just talked about, please let us know. Feel free to type it in the chat or take yourself off mute, and Christine and I will do our best to answer them.
So it can be about anything we talked about or just a question in general.
I have a question about mask wearing in COVID for the challenges with children with hearing loss. How have you sort of worked around that? Is there a big backlog of children now?
Yeah, so we at some places that we have had placements, we've had to wear masks, and other places, depending on the rules they have in that place, we haven't had to wear masks. We also have access to clear masks, so these clear masks can help the child see our mouth, which is handy because that way we can wear a mask, but they're still able to see our mouth. Usually, I guess we over articulate and kind of raise our volume so they can see us if we do need to wear a mask. Otherwise, yeah, we do have to wear that clear mask, or if there's no mask rule, then we can just take it off, I guess. Yeah.
And have you noticed more children being referred since COVID because they missed out on the visual facial cues from their teachers, or?
We haven't seen a particular difference between how much referrals, but I guess there have to be someone kind of counting them to compare whether there has been more or less. There is always quite a long wait list usually, depending on the clinic. So we're not too sure if it's because of after the COVID pandemic or just in general. However, because kids, they want to socialize, we would presume that COVID can have some sort of effect on their speech and language development, because they usually would have stayed inside rather than going out to school or seeing their friends. Yeah.
Does anyone else have any questions? Any takeaways?
I had a question.
Yeah.
The children that have, I suppose, like different cultural backgrounds and accents and speak birth languages differently from English, how would you differentiate some of their pronunciations if they just can't get some of the phonetic correctly?
Yeah, so often when we work with children that come from a culturally and linguistically diverse background, we often do a comparison to see if any of the errors that they are making are actually like present in their first language. So for example, I worked with a child that was of Vietnamese background, and she had some patterns where she would delete like the last sound in the words, but then we realized that that was sort of something that's common in her speaking. So we understand that when we're working with children that come from these different backgrounds, we understand what like patterns are common in their culture, or maybe they don't have specific sounds in their first language, and so we don't necessarily say, oh, they have a disorder, but it's more just that that's just a difference in their speech. And so we kind of understand that when we diagnose them.
Yeah. We also have some assessments that differ according to their background. I haven't used any yet. However, I have heard of certain assessments that are catered towards certain, backgrounds, because there is that kind of language difference. Yeah.
Thank you. And Leonie mentioned her takeaway was the specific feedback and praise when they get it right. It was really good examples of that. Thank you. And I liked, mocking it up for them and fixing it up, like making it a mistake for them. I thought that was a fun way to help them.
Yeah, it takes the pressure off them a little bit as well.
Yeah, it just makes it a bit fun and silly. Yeah.
Because they'll be like, oh, they made a mistake as well. So like, we don't feel as bad when we make a mistake, because they're making mistakes too.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Anyone else? What percentage of disorders get resolved? That's from Martina.
That's a bit of a tricky one to answer. That would require some research. I think it depends on the disorder, because as you guys saw, there was 5 different disorders, and in those disorders, there's different severity. So some children might be mild, so might resolve quickly. Some children are very severe. You might have some improvements, but not resolve quickly. And it depends as well on the cause of that speech disorder. So if it's a child that has had something like, it's like a physical problem, they might need surgery, it's a bit trickier for us to help them. However, some children are just a bit delayed, and we can just catch them up with their peers. So yeah, it's really dependent on the child.
Yeah. Question. Any other amazing questions? No. All right. Well, thank you so much, Julia and Christine. Thank you, everyone, for coming and listening.
I hope you got something out of it today.
Yeah, it's been awesome. Thank you. Thank you. So I might stop recording if I can. Or Hannah, if you can stop recording if you're still listening.